He is the co-host of the First Mint podcast. We now welcome Phil Doucet onto Hoopsology. How's it going, Phil?
Great. Thanks for having me, guys. Happy to be here.
Well, Phil, lots to talk to you about. And since the trade deadline has just concluded as of the recording of this podcast, and your podcast and our website too covers NBA Top Shot. Just want to get your opinion on how the trade deadline affects NBA Top Shot. I mean, I don't even know if it's been around a year yet. So this is kind of like a new frontier. So can you kind of tell us what it's been like today in terms of the trade deadline and NBA Top Shot?
Yeah, so it's really strange because the market only moves the way people want it to move, right? So people are there anticipating trades. People are advising others to buy the rumors and then sell the news was the saying of the day, right? So if you hear a player is going to be traded, go and buy him. When it's officially announced that he's been traded, sell him off for twice the price that he went for originally, right? But why though? Why are people buying players that get traded? Nothing special happens to those moments. I mean, he changes teams, but I mean, was it his last shot as part of that current team? No, right? So it's a little weird to see how the market works, but if you do learn how the market works, it can be profitable because, I mean, we saw it all day. People were buying all sorts of players. I even retweeted a fake Kyle Lowry trade earlier today because a lot of the Toronto media was duped by the fake Woj. And a lot of the Toronto media put out a Kyle Lowry trade for Kyle Kuzma. And I had it out there for only 30 seconds. And then I have people sending me DMs saying that they loaded up on Kyle Lowry moments with the Raptors. So
oh, man.
Just to give you an example, right? That's how crazy it is. Hard to explain.
Yeah. Phil, take us back to the beginning. And how did you first hear about NBA Top Shot? And then when you first heard about the concept, were you like skeptical? I know I was. I mean, I've done a complete 180. I went from completely thinking it was ridiculous to now I'm trying to get my first pack. So my mind has just been completely changed within the last, I would say, month or so. But tell us your first experience with NBA Top Shot and how you got deeply involved with it.
It started with, so I run a small podcast. I've been running a podcast that covers the NBA 2K League, which is the video gaming league, the esports. Yeah. I've been covering that since the first season. So I have my own podcast called the Expose Podcast, which is kind of the touchy side of things, not just reporting on games, but all the side drama and stuff. And my brother contacted me, interested in having his own podcast. So he asked me a bunch of advice. Not really advice. He kind of asked me the ins and outs of podcasting. I didn't hear from him after like 2 or 3 months after that. And then all of a sudden, he posted on Twitter the first episode of the First Mint podcast. So I said, you know what? I'll support my brother. I'll download this just to give him a download. I'll throw it on at work and I'll listen to it, even though I might not listen to it actually. And we'll go from there. So I played the first episode. It wasn't a very long one. And then he said a couple things in there that really caught my attention. I mean, I know nothing about cryptocurrency, blockchain, NFTs and all that stuff. But he was talking about this stuff, but connecting it to the NBA. And I'm a massive NBA fan. So that caught my eye. Sure enough, I asked him what this is. I signed up for an account and we went from there. He gave me a couple of gifts. He helped me out to start. I only invested a tiny little bit of money. And this is back in the day where everything cost $1 or $2. And yeah, so here we are. And he knew I had a lot of experience with this type of stuff. He knew we made a great tag team when we do anything together. So he asked me if I'd like to join, and then I hopped in with everything I had.
A follow-up to that, Phil, since you mentioned the 2K League, and I've asked other guests about this, and forgive me if this sounds kind of ridiculous, but when I first heard about NBA Top Shot, immediately what popped in my mind is opening the packs in NBA 2K. I was like, man, they are just, right. I mean, I can just, it seems like in NBA 2K, I can open a pack and play the player, like in the game. That seems more valuable than having to highlight. Is there any type of correlation between this and NBA 2K, or do you think there will be in the future?
There is not right now any sort of correlation, but what they are doing is they do have some sort of game they're coming out with where you'll be able to use your moments in a game and win other moments and stuff like that. Okay. So that is actually one of their top 3 priorities right now. They're working on it. I think it's called Hardcourt or something like that. And you'll be able to download an app for it, and you'll be able to use your moments to play games against other people and things like that. So they're really trying to develop the entire idea. It is still young, and I don't blame you for being skeptical because a lot of the stuff that has gone on has been, a little iffy, and people get they get irked pretty easily on Top Shot. And for someone who hasn't had a pack yet, it's kind of devastating, right? Because you want to get in on it, but some of the prices are so high, you're not just going to spend, thousands of dollars or hundreds of dollars on something you can't really kickstart like other people did. Because when I joined, there were only packs available, and I didn't want to buy them. I said, I'm not spending $9 on a pack when I can spend $1 on a Jimmy Butler low serial number on the marketplace. I may not get one of those in my pack, so why don't I just choose what I want on the marketplace? Now, in hindsight, I should have bought like 100 packs and kept them,
Sure.
right? But I don't blame people, because the game has completely changed since I joined in early January. Now it's the opposite. You're dying for a pack, because getting a pack is like winning the lottery in Top Shot right now. And the value of a pack is worth what, I can't even tell you how many times what it used to be. So I know they're developing a lot of different angles to this. They're trying to incorporate Top Shot with actual NBA games once the fans are back. Something where you get rewards for bringing your moments to games. You may even get, courtside access, things like that,
wow.
right? They're really working with the NBA on developing something that'll make the experience for collectors more than just sitting there and having a little highlight clip to watch, right?
Phil, I'm wondering, what was the catalyst in your mind that kind of made Top Shot blow up and become such a high demand NFT? Because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it was around mid to late February that this really, really started to take off and accelerate. What started that?
I'm not sure how it got out, but I do know that I was one of the early people. So the more I started telling people, the more everybody got into it. We're talking everyone I knew. I told my entire 2K League, family about it. Everybody started coming in at the same time. And I think it was really when it took a couple of players, I think, tweeting out something about Top Shot. A couple of people went on, I think an ESPN article came out. The Ringer put out some stuff. Bleacher Report put out some stuff, and it really caught people's eyes. And I think the main thing is obviously money and collecting, but money. I mean, people are hearing of a LeBron James that was bought for a couple of $100s now selling for, $175,000 a few months later, and things like that. And also, it's the idea of blockchain and cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, ETH, that really has people intrigued. Because someone like myself who has no previous experience in that, for me to be able to combine that with the NBA is what was intriguing. And I'm not really into the stock market, but this is literally a stock market for the NBA. So I said, I'm such a big sports fan that I'll give it a shot, because this is funner to me than trying to, join all these groups and learn what's hot on the stock market and try and figure all that out. So that's the intrigue for me. I'm not trying to get rich quick. I think one of the problem, guys, is that once that big wave hit, a lot of people joined hearing all these success stories of accounts going from 500 to 500,000 in the space of 3 weeks, and everybody wanted in on that. But that's just not how it works, right? It's nice to see people stick to the collecting part as well as making a bit of money.
For sure. Yeah, sounds much more fun than stonks to me, for sure. So the other thing I wanted to ask is that I've heard people talk about this great community behind Top Shot. Is Top Shot now kind of a community unto itself, or is it more just kind of collectively throughout Reddit, Twitter, etc., that this is really blown up into a community?
I think that's a great question, because when I jumped into this, I didn't expect anything other than just having my own collection and doing my own collecting. But now I feel like I know so many of these people, a lot of our viewers and listeners, and people on Twitter. I feel like I know them really well. And I feel like if we had some sort of, meetup, I could meet hundreds of people and say, oh, wow, this is who you are. And I feel like I know you so well. But at the same time, a sense of community like that is really what drives this whole thing, because we're able to speak to each other. You're able to give advice to each other. You're able to compare notes with others. When you're collecting regular sports cards, the process is a little bit different, although there are forums and online stuff you can do. But everything is virtual. You can gift things to other people on this. The sense of community, I think, really drives the product for now anyways, because we're still in beta mode, and it's still a fairly small crowd that's there compared to what it could be in a few years.
Phil, when do you think Top Shot will get out of beta? Have you heard anything regarding that, just in terms of their timeline? Because I kind of disagree with Matt. I feel like it hasn't even blown up yet, just because, I mean, I was telling him off air that I haven't seen a promo on like Inside the NBA or on ESPN at all. I've seen them run stories on it, but certainly not just like trying to promote it. Once we get those promos, my question is this site going to even be able to handle the volume of people? Because I can just see easily like 10 million people. You imagine just a big time game. It's, LeBron versus Kevin Durant, some massive highlight. And then if something comes out in terms of a Top Shot, people just overloading the website. So do you think Dapper Labs and just the developers are prepared to deal with such a high upswing once this thing truly like gets super popular, not only in the United States but globally?
Yeah, I mean, once it goes global, I think we're all in big trouble, right? I mean, yeah, somebody mentioned a lot of the Asian countries aren't even onto this yet, and they're massive NBA fans, and they go crazy for their product over there. Some of the biggest sales in the world are in the Asian area, right? So the Asian countries. So once they get into it, I think it'll blow up. Can the site handle it? I don't know, because that's been one of the big issues the last couple of months has been the high volume crashing the site when there's a big pack drop or just at any time. But if you've been on there the last couple of weeks, we haven't had too many interruptions. I think they're starting to figure that out. I think they're starting to allocate a lot of their money towards the IT side of things. Because, I mean, I've said to myself like 4 or 5 times since I've joined, if I was in charge of this whole thing, I would have fired the entire IT team over and over again, right? And that's just my frustrations with some of the issues they've had. But it's been actually pretty smooth sailing the last few weeks. And it's really promising because I feel like I've been on the site for a year now, but it's only been 2 months, right? 2.5 months. So to see the progress that they've made, I think they're really taking the steps necessary to fix the product, fix the website, get out of beta, which I think they said the other day they were looking within the next 5 months, which is really encouraging. And maybe to time it with the start of next season when they'll make their big push. It is a little bit late now. They could make a push during the playoffs and the finals. But I think if they really work on their product first, before bringing in the UFC and all that, which is a whole other project, and I hope they don't just open that up to everybody and everybody goes crazy on that too. I hope they really think about it because the NFTs are not going anywhere. This is not going anywhere. This is the future where in 5 years you'll say, wow, remember when that was just a startup project? So I think they'll be able to handle it, hopefully, but there'll be a lot of trial and error along the way.
Phil, we put out a question on our Facebook page in terms of has anybody heard of Top Shot? And one of the responses that we got was from a listener stating their concerns in terms of NFTs in the environment. And this is something that I wasn't even aware of until he brought it to my attention. That's in terms of the potential damage into the environment. Have you heard those concerns too? Is that a legit worry? Because I've read kind of opposite. I'm like, I don't know if. On one side of me is like I kind of buy this, and the other side I'm like, well, there's other stuff that's also energy consumption as well that we use on a daily basis. So, can you kind of have you heard any of those concerns at all?
I would love to make up a really detailed answer on that, but I've heard the concerns, but I've been so caught up with the basketball part of it that for me, NFTs are still brand new. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend I'm a big expert in NFTs.
Sure.
My brother LG is the one actually who probably has more expertise on the NFT side, and I have more expertise on the NBA side. So that's why we make a good combo. But I have heard that, and it's very interesting. But then I've also got Mark Cuban in my ear telling me that this is the future. This is great. We should all be investing in this stuff. And it's hard to go against someone like Mark Cuban, as wild as he can be sometimes. If you listen to him over the years, you've probably done well. So I think I'd love to, it is a great question. And we get that question sometimes too. And I think at the first minute, what we'll be looking to do as we move forward with different projects, because it's not just NBA Top Shot, I think we'll be looking to make some educational videos for those exact reasons and those exact questions, not just should I buy a Zion moment for so-and-so, right? Which is the most common question is how much should I sell this for? How much should I buy this for? I think the educational side of it, NFT-wise, because it's so new, is a really important subject. And I need to educate myself a little bit more on that as well.
Phil, you mentioned Mark Cuban, a guy who certainly knows a thing or two about value. You mentioned the future outlook for this, that this isn't going away. I mean, is there any world in which the value as they release more and more packs and as this opens up globally? I mean, is there any chance that value doesn't increase with Top Shot?
I think so, because a normal market, the way I look at it is the market is still really inflated right now. As much as people think the current dip is the end of the world, it's almost not sustainable over the years for everyone who comes in, buys a pack for $14 and gets $900 worth of value in their pack. Nowhere on a consistent basis, right? Maybe if you get a really special pack, one out of every 30 people gets one of those, maybe. But where we're at right now, where you're the minimum value you get in each pack is so high, I don't think it's reasonable or sustainable. I think where we'll hit the right market point will be when the value of some packs is not as much as you paid for that pack. So I think we're still light years away from that because everyone's still jumping into the market. But I think 3, 4, or 5 years down the line, that's how it should be. But again, who knows? The sky's the limit with what they can do with game day experiences and all that. And I believe that this is something that'll continue to grow for years. So I don't think we're anywhere close to ever having $1 moments back on the market like we should. I think the minimum for anything right now is $9 or $10, and that's not normal. So I think eventually we'll get there, and that'll be the right type of market, but it's still very inflated for now.
Gotcha.
Bill,
sorry, Justin. I have a follow up to that.
Sure.
Could you see, I guess the other threat I would see is that if the NFL sees this increasing in value, they may jump in, make their own NFT, something like that. I mean, could you see that as another potential threat that would make Top Shot maybe specifically with the NBA, a little bit more niche rather than, a time like right now when there's not that competitor? This is something for even the casual sports fan where might pique their interest because it's what's out there right now.
That's a great question, Matt, because we don't know yet, right? There are not too many competitors in the professional sports world to NBA Top Shot. Sorare is the international soccer one, which you would think is the biggest thing out there. But their platform is a little strange where it's kind of fantasy based. So the players that you own have to do well in games, and it hasn't been that popular yet. But I've seen a lot of European soccer players start tweeting about it, which makes me think that it may take off soon. But where NBA Top Shot has an advantage, regardless of who joins the game, is that they were there first. And they're doing their trial and error now. They're figuring things out ahead of time. And I don't know if Dapper Labs is going to purchase every possible license and run it under their platform. But I do know that they've got the UFC coming. On their website, they've got the NFLPA logo. I don't know what that means. Also, we heard Roham, who's in charge of the entire thing. He's the head honcho. Roham even tweeted something about the NHL being on board and that they're working with them, but he didn't confirm anything. So it all depends where the market goes. I think once that happens, Matt, I think people will go to other markets. You will lose people on Top Shot, but they may come back, right? It might be one of those where they want to put some money into something else and get started. But I think eventually you'll keep coming back. I didn't only collect one specific type of sports cards when I was young. I had 3 or 4 different sports going. But this is such a long-term thing, right? That who knows when these others are coming and how good they're going to be. We just don't know.
Phil, sorry, Justin, one more follow-up.
Sure.
I'll throw it to you. Do you think the NBA has any sort of advantage just in, and I'm being biased here as a basketball podcast host, but just the beauty of the game? I mean, getting slam dunks. Do you think there's an advantage over, I'll go back to the NFL example, over like highlights from the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, that's so interesting too, because I was on a UFC podcast the other night, and one of the hosts is a UFC fighter. And he didn't know about Top Shot. So he was trying to put himself in the shoes of what he would buy for the UFC. He said, well, do we have enough moments? Because in any given basketball game, you can have 50, 60, 70 different moments that could make it on Top Shot. But in a UFC fight, I mean, you may not have more than 2 or 3 moments worth putting on there. So he was talking about things like, guys getting hit in the wrong places, eye pokes, guys dancing when they come out to their music as being things that he'd be interested in, because he doesn't think there'd be enough on the UFC side to really sell the amounts that NBA Top Shot does. So it is interesting because a basketball game for me is one of the sports where there's so many moments. Football, I'm sure you could find something, There's probably a lot of moments every week, and in the history of the game, there's a ton of them. But globally, basketball and the NBA are still ahead of the NFL. No matter what anybody says, globally, after international soccer, I think the NBA is right up there in the top 3 for sure. So I think NBA has that advantage as well over the others.
That is really fascinating, Phil. As myself being a huge mixed martial arts fan, there's plenty of highlights, and that's when it came from a fighter.
Yeah.
I mean, you have submissions, you have
That's right.
Just where do we start? I mean, head kick knockouts, just all different fighting styles. I mean, their archive is pretty large through the years. So, and usually there's a highlight, in every single fight, whether, a lot of jiu-jitsu practitioners, if they're really geeky about it, I mean, it could be a top shot about a nice, transition or something if you want to get super geeky. So I find that, shocking, quite honestly.
Well, he's a bit of a wild card, so that might explain that. He seems more interested in the crazy stuff and bloopers and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
But it was a concern raised, right? Because they are dipping into the UFC market now. They're putting together test groups of people. And I mean, it is a concern from some people. So I guess it is. But I agree with you. There's so much. I mean, we could go over the history of the UFC or MMA in general. Exactly. And you could go on and on and on and on about different moments you could put on there that people would buy, for sure, right? Too much history.
For sure. And one thing, since you brought that up, is the UFC, it's behind a paywall. It's pay-per-view. And a lot of the highlights compared to the NBA, I mean, one of the arguments I've heard is, these digital moments you can see on YouTube. That's certainly true. But I think if you understand the value of NBA Top Shot, I think that's clear in terms of what you get in a digital collectible. However, with the UFC, a lot of those highlights aren't available to see. I mean, it's behind a paywall, and the only way you can get it is through UFC Fight Pass, and the occasional fight on YouTube here or there. So when UFC develops their own Top Shot, or basically gets involved with their own digital collectible, do you see it being more exclusive? Do you see it being more expensive? Just because, a lot of those highlights could be behind a paywall when you first see it. And also the UFC, they're pretty hardcore about having their highlights on social media. They go after people. So especially now, if they're gonna put their, a library on a digital collectible behind another paywall per se, do you see it being more expensive, a UFC digital collectible compared to the NBA?
I think so, Justin. I think at first I see it being a lot more expensive than NBA Top Shot was, because now a lot of people have experience with this, with Top Shot. You'd have a lot of those people sliding over to the UFC platform and hitting the ground a lot harder than they did with Top Shot, because nobody knew what was happening at the beginning, right? But you're right. With the UFC, you can't even go back and find any event highlights legally anyways on YouTube. They're not there. Bellator has them out there. They'll show you their events. But the UFC, you cannot go back and see last weekend's UFC Fight Night highlights on YouTube. You just can't. You'll have to find them on the black market somewhere by doing Google searches. I've tried over and over again. When I miss an event, I can't find them. So yeah, absolutely. These moments would kind of be more rare the organic way, not rare in terms of mint size, but rare because a lot of people don't see them. And when they show them on SportsCenter, sometimes they just show them in image mode, right? They don't show them actually playing out. But something else that's interesting that he mentioned was that how would that work for fighters getting paid? Because there has to be, I mean, you know how it is with MMA fighters.
Yeah.
That is their main interest, is how do I make money? And he was wondering if they start going crazier, thinking they might make more money, but that's not how it works, right? It's kind of a general payment where everybody gets a cut, and then they can use everybody's highlights, I assume is how they're going to do it. Because a lot of the NBA players have no idea about Top Shot, but they must be getting some money out of it, but somehow they have no clue. So it can't be a lot, and it must not matter how much your moment sells, even though some of them think that way. Like Terry Rozier, who bought all his moments and tried to sell them at double the price. He must have thought that his royalties would have gone up after that, but that's not how it works. But yeah, no, it's really interesting. I think the UFC will be a smaller community to start with. But I think when people kind of dabble into, because UFC collectibles, it's not the same as other sports. Nobody really has UFC, sports cards. So you'd be kind of starting fresh with people, and you don't have to convince a huge portion of the ones collecting, physical cards to dabble into the digital market now, which is what is the issue right now with the NBAs. You got all these sports card collectors that say, we don't want anything to do with this new age stuff. We're sticking to our cards and all that stuff, which is a whole other story. And until you get all them kind of merged together, you may not have the numbers that you could have if everybody was on board. But I think the UFC would be a bit different, because there really hasn't been too many collectibles that I know of anyways on the market. So this would be new for everybody.
That's a massive Pandora's box, because just as like MMA family tracking fighters' rights, and that's something we could spend just 2 hours talking about, the Reebok deal and other things. We'd be here all day. But right. you brought up another thing with regular trading cards and traditional trading card collectors, and I'm getting the vibe that they're not totally down with this all the way. And it seems weird because people collect all types of different stuff. I mean, my brother collected Pokemon cards and just Magic the Gathering, and I wasn't outraged or threatened by like my own trading card collectibles. So why is this a negative tone? Because I've watched some YouTube videos. I get the sense that they're kind of anti this, and I just find it curious as to why.
Yeah, you don't have everybody on the same page. A lot of people are. I mean, it depends when you started collecting. But if you've got tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands or millions invested in real sports cards, you're kind of hesitating to move away from that. It's been your passion for years and your hobby for years, that you don't want to join a world that is now fully established. You don't know anything about this crypto stuff and the digital world. I could see that. It's kind of an old school, new school thing, right? I recently gave my 16-year-old son a box of cards that I had when I was young. My parents got rid of it. They're like, you know what, we're throwing this out, or you keep it. I said, okay, I'll keep it. And there's thousands of sports cards in there. And he opened that up, I'd say last summer, and he found gold in there pretty much, because he was looking up the prices and all that. So he started selling this stuff. But the process to sell, guys, is, all right, so we're in Canada. To have one of these cards graded, he has to send it down to Florida. Right. That process alone takes, I mean, he hasn't even had them back yet. They're so backlogged with sports cards and grading them that they still have it. So 7 months later, he still doesn't have it back. Once he gets it back, he has to find a buyer. He's got to send it out to that buyer. There might be more, more border fees and things like that. Who knows what it'll cost him to get that card back? Because if the value is very high, they may consider that something that's crossing the border with high value. Who knows?
Wow.
But in this digital world, though, you can literally go online 24/7. You don't have to mint your moment. Your moment, it doesn't need to be minted a 9, 10, 8, whatever. They're all the same except the serial number. And you can sell it any time of the day to anybody you want. It's all on the blockchain for everybody to see. So it's a big step for OG collectors of sports cards to kind of switch over. I just think they need a bit more education as to how this could work. And they need a bit more confidence that this is something that will work, because you're not really doing both, right? Now he's trying to ship his entire collection out. He doesn't want to grade them anymore. He's on Top Shot, right? And he's ready to be done with the physical sports cards because it's so much work compared to the digital ones.
Interesting. One of the things Justin and I were talking about earlier was that there are people who love shoes and shoe collectors, and then there are people who resell their shoes and even have that as a career on its own. I'm curious if and I know things are in their infant stages, in the beta stages still, but what is the sense of maybe what percentage, or have you seen a lot of people that are starting to make potentially a career, or at least a side hustle out of trading, selling these Top Shot moments?
I think a lot of people considered it when we hit the highest of highs in February, but now a lot of people are back down to earth after some of the prices, right? We were talking some people's accounts going from the $75 they invested to 60 or 70,000 in the span of a month, which people were thinking they could do that consistently. But once they realize, like in the times that we're in now, and their accounts are back down to 15 or 20,000, they're not able to do it. Having said that, my brother LG, who started the First Mint enterprise, pretty much, I'll call it an enterprise because it's not only NBA Top Shot, it will dabble into all NFTs and all sports projects and things like that. He is now doing this full time for the most part. And he had a full-time job before that. He's jumped into this full time now. It's been very profitable for the people who were there very early, like last summer. Their accounts are all between, say $500,000 and $1 million or more, because they own so much volume of the cheap product back then, and now the prices have skyrocketed on every single one of them. So it kind of depends when you jumped into this, but I think you'll see some people, absolutely, because you've got some professional flippers that are there all the time, and I don't know how they do it. I'm there struggling to make money, and figure out how to do it consistently. but I'm more in it for the collecting, so it doesn't bother me. Any opportunity I see to flip something, I'll do it. But you've got those people, they'll buy something for 70 and they'll sell it for 75. And they'll do it 100 times in one night. So, I mean, yeah, it's a side hustle for sure, right? And like you said, it is comparable to the shoe collecting and the shoe drops because of all the chaos that goes around pack drops. Pack drops are identical to shoe drops. You've got the issues with the bots. You've got all the accusations of people creating hundreds and thousands of accounts, which was a thing. And they've really struggled with that, to be honest. So that's one of the things that needs to be fully cleaned up before people can really put their faith in that.
Phil, can you just estimate when we'll get historical moments from the NBA within Top Shot? Because that's going to be a huge thing. I mean, there's so many issues, and I mean, the one person that comes to mind is Michael Jordan, just because he is not affiliated with the NBA Players Association. And another player I want to ask about is Charles Barkley, just because he's notorious for not being in the video game. So I can't imagine him wanting to be a part of the NBA Top Shot. I mean, he doesn't even have a Twitter account. So
that's a good.
I'm just wondering, with some of these other players that either hate technology or just have their own kind of weird things with the NBA, what do you think? What do you anticipate in terms of when historical moments get into NBA Top Shot? Because I think that's going to be gold. I mean, holy cow!
I agree.
We hit like even mid 2000s. I mean, sheesh, when Kobe, I mean, and all his stuff comes out. I mean, let alone anybody else. I mean, it's just going to be a massive Pandora's box. So is there discussion beginning about like historical moments, or is this kind of, we're stuck in the here and now, we're just trying to deal with this season?
Well, there are a few that are it's called the Run It Back set, and they've already teased that there will be another Run It Back very soon. And some of the players that they listed as being part of that running back are Allen Iverson, Shaquille O'Neal, and Tracy McGrady. They would not reveal the rest of them, but those are some pretty big names in the history of basketball. Not exactly the really old school ones like you'd expect, maybe, like you said, Michael Jordan. I think Kobe Bryant, if ever he made his way on a Top Shot, he would probably break the site and maybe even overtake LeBron James right now, who's the king of Top Shot. You put anything out there, LeBron, and people lose their minds. And I mean, people are buying it for $200,000-$300,000. Some of the rare ones, right? But I think if you bring Kobe into this, I think it would change the game quite a bit. But Charles Barkley, that's an interesting one, because if he goes on the air on TNT there and he starts talking about Top Shots and stuff, that'd be huge for Top Shot, more than some of the players. And he'd probably never stop talking about his moments, and they'd probably play them on the air every week, showing him in some of the battles he was in. He would talk trash to everybody in the videos. He'd be a game changer, but he obviously doesn't really have a price, right? Because you're right, he's not part of anything, and I'm sure he's been offered tons of money to be part of these projects in the past, and he's nowhere to be seen. So, but I think what Top Shot will do, and they've been rumored to have this pack coming out soon, I think they're going to wait till the offseason. It makes a lot of sense to wait until the offseason when things are quiet. I was asking my brother, how was it last summer when you first joined? He goes, we used to go 4 to 5 days without one transaction on the marketplace. I mean, you can't go half a second without thousands of transactions now. So, yeah, it's changed quite a bit. But if they play their cards right and they save these older sets for the summertime and probably put out some playoff stuff and some final stuff and things like that, they can probably make it through the offseason and sustain that all the way up until the new season starts. The only thing is, though, they do not have a license for the Olympics. And the Olympics are huge this year. A lot of these players, as the game grows, so does the international game. Look at Canada's team. Canada can fill all 5 starters twice with NBA players for the first time ever, right? And they'll be in the same group as the USA. So that's a little disappointing that we won't be able to have access to that. Things like Vince Carter dunking over that 7'4" guy there on France, things like that we would love. I mean, I'd pay top dollar for a moment like that, being a huge Vince Carter and Raptors fan, but they don't have the license for anything Olympics related. So that's not happening. Maybe the Olympics will do their own NFTs. That could be, a whole different story where they sell their own stuff for all the sports, Usain Bolt moments, all that, who knows, right? That's still part of the future. But that Run It Back set will be coming out. And if OG collectors who collect cards are ever going to get into the game, sets like that might start piquing their interest, right? Players that they're used to collecting and and things like that. But Michael Jordan is, I mean, that's I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever see him on Top Shot. He's got his own brand, and I'm sure the price would be pretty high.
So you think it'd be minimal, even if Top Shot grows to great popularity? There's really no chance of him being associated with NBA Top Shot. I mean, he was in 2K. That did happen eventually. Right. So you just don't see it as a possibility, like 10, 15 years down the line. Just out of curiosity.
No, wait, maybe. Yeah, I mean, money talks at the end of the day. He doesn't need it, but you're right. He has done other projects before. And LaMelo Ball, his very own LaMelo Ball, who's I'd say he's a top 5 hottest thing on Top Shot right now. All his players are getting into Top Shot more than any other team. So the Orlando Magic and the Charlotte Hornets are the 2 teams where all 5 starters are all over Top Shot. They do streams all the time. They're all over it. So you can't help but wonder. I mean, eventually Michael Jordan will hear about this, and I'm sure he will ask the question, hey, why don't I have a moment on there, right? Especially when LeBron is dominating the way he is on Top Shot. The competitor in Michael might say, hey, let me trump him with one set or something, you know, a Legends set where he comes out and they've only made 50 of them or something. That would also destroy the site, and we probably wouldn't have a site for a month or something if that happens.
Well, Phil, thank you very much for joining the show. Really appreciate it. Please let our listeners and viewers know where they can find you on social media, and then also what projects and anything else you have working on this coming year.
Well, we've got a lot coming up on the First Mint. We've got a great team behind the First Mint. A lot of people think that it's just my brother and myself. My brother is the absolute mastermind behind the whole thing. He runs the enterprise. I just help out wherever I can. I'm just happy to be on the air when I can't. You can find it at the First Mint on Twitter. We're not on Instagram completely. There is a brand new website that is coming out in the next couple of days. It's going to be super exciting stuff with rumors, everything you need to know about Top Shot and NFTs. And the question from that listener that you brought up earlier is a really good one, and I'll bring it up to him. And that's something we should be discussing, because we do get asked that question quite a bit about the environment and things like that. Again, at the First Mint on Twitter is where everything at. You can find the link to the podcast there. As for me, you can find me at The Real Phil D on Twitter. I have another podcast, as I mentioned earlier. It's the NBA 2K League Expose podcast. That'll be starting up soon. We've had the first episode this year, but the season doesn't start until May. And it's a little bit difficult this year because the players can't fly into their markets without quarantining and all that. But look out for that. It's a really fun league. It's the actual NBA teams. A lot of people don't know this. And they draft players the way that the NBA drafts players. I mean, David Silver was there for the first pick the last couple of years, calling it out. And, you know, it's a real draft. They get drafted from all over the world. They go to their home markets. They control every player on the court. There's 5 versus 5. Exciting stuff. Very fun to watch. But keep checking the First Mint. We've got a lot of stuff coming up, and I think the listeners will be pretty excited about that.
Phil, thank you very much. We really enjoyed the chat. Hopefully we'll talk to you soon. And just happy collecting. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, guys. I had a great time. Thank you.